Now witness, and it's 70 years since the Battle of Britain changed the course of the Second World War. Simon Watts has spoken to a pilot who took part in the fight for Britain's skies.
In the summer of 1940, one of the fiercest air battles of all time raged over southern Britain. The German Luftwaffe wanted to destroy the Royal Air Force to pave the way for a land invasion. But in what became known as the Battle of Britain, the RAF resisted.
Here is the midnight news, and this is Alvar Liddell reading it. Up to 10 o'clock, 175 German aircraft had been destroyed in today's raids over this country. Today was the most costly for the German Air Force for nearly a month. In daylight raids, between 350 and 400 enemy aircraft were launched in two attacks against London and southeast England. About half of them were shot down.
The squadron was a great crowd of young men. There weren't any bad apples in the barrel. We were all young, we were all enthusiastic, and we had to defend our country.
Wing Commander Bob Foster was one of the Battle of Britain pilots. A 20-year-old volunteer from London, he'd chosen the riskiest option for an RAF member.
The image of a fighter pilot was more attractive than sitting in a bomber flying over Germany or whatever it was. And I think also maybe it's to that I was an only son, a bit of an individualist, and I was happy doing my own thing rather than being part of a crew.
The Luftwaffe was such an imminent threat that the RAF had to put pilots into action before giving them much training. Bob Foster was expected to learn as he went along, and on one mission near London, disaster almost struck.
We saw below us some ME-110s, and I opened fire, and as I opened fire, the whole of my engine blew up in front of me with a huge bang. A lot of smoke and glycol and stuff poured out of the engine. My initial reaction was to bail out, but it didn't burn, and I found that the controls were still working, and so I cut off the fuel and looked round for somewhere to land. And if you want to do a forced landing, you obviously look for the largest field you could find, and I didn't know where I was. I had the least idea where I was. So I saw this big field and glided down, managed to get my undercarriage down, and much to my amazement, an airman came up to me and I said, "God, where am I?" And he said, "You've landed at Gatwick, sir, Gatwick Airfield."
So by pure luck, you managed to put yourself down in the ideal place.
Well, absolutely, it's pure luck.
A friend from Croydon came down and picked you up and then took you back. What was the reaction of your colleagues there? Had they assumed that you'd survived or that you'd been killed?
The first chap I saw was his squadron commander, a man called Walter Churchill. And his reaction was a sort of, "Good God, we thought you'd bought it. But anyway, nice to see you." And he said, "Why don't you take the afternoon off?" Which was very good of him, yeah. There weren't many psychiatrists, psychologists and all that around in those days, so you got the afternoon off, and the next day, according to my logbook, I flew, I think, on 5 occasions.
You were flying pretty much every day, weren't you?
Yes, the squadron was on some sort of readiness for 6 weeks solidly.
The RAF flew so often that their experience and skill quickly increased, and they started to make headway against the Luftwaffe. RAF pilots all wanted an individual kill of an enemy aircraft, and Bob Foster remembers his first clearly.
It was a lovely sunny day, I remember that. Suddenly there was a shout from behind, "Turkey squadron, break, break, break," and Turkey was their code name. 109s coming out of the sun were coming down on us. And a chap on my right, called Charles English, must have been a bit slower, or something, I don't know, but the last thing I saw as I broke down was his whole plane going up in flames. He got out, I believe, I didn't see this, but his parachute caught in the back of the plane and he was killed. But I dived right down and pulled out, and then, much to my amazement, just ahead of me was an ME-109, heading south, obviously going home. So I got up behind him and shot him down, and that was the end of that.
You didn't hesitate? There wasn't a moment of sympathy for the guy just going home and taking his mind off it?
No, certainly not. No. It was a golden opportunity, wasn't it? There was nothing personal about this. I mean, no, it was a plane I was shooting down, a plane that had probably shot down one of my friends. If it had been a bomb, it had dropped bombs on my home or something. So there was no feeling of regret or remorse about it, as far as I was concerned.
Beneath the deadly combat in the skies, normal English life continued. And after flying 4 or 5 missions, the Battle of Britain pilots also carried on as usual.
In the evenings it was pretty quiet, so most of us went down to the local pub for something to eat and a few beers and so on. Someone might come over and offer to buy us a pint of beer or something like that, but they didn't ask a lot of questions. People got on with their lives. I remember one time when we took off, it must have been a weekend, 4 people were playing tennis, and as we flew over them, they stopped and waved their rackets, and we waved back, or I did anyway, and off I went fighting, and they presumably went back playing tennis. But then what else could they do? I mean, life had to go on, didn't it?
Did you also have a strong sense of patriotism, that this was England you were defending? You were flying over the fields of southern England and seeing people playing tennis and pubs?
Not consciously, but of course it was. I mean, here we were again being attacked by the Germans, and we had to defend our country. I mean, this is why Churchill's speeches hit home so hard. The great speeches that he made rallied the country.
Then, as the British pilots were growing stronger, Adolf Hitler made a tactical mistake.
Und wenn die britische Luftwaffe 2 oder 3 oder 4.000 Kilogramm Bomben wirft, dann werfen wir jetzt in einer Nacht 150, 180, 230, 300, 400...
He responded to a British bombing raid by ordering a full air assault on London. That meant the German pilots were splitting their effort between taking on the RAF and flying bombing missions. A few months later, the RAF won the Battle of Britain. The price was that 1 in 6 British and Commonwealth pilots were killed. But Bob Foster was always confident he'd make it.
You're either an optimist or a pessimist, and I think I was an optimist in a way that, OK, there was always a fear that you might be shot down. It almost happened. Personally, I was optimistic that I would get through. There was never that feeling that this is the last time or anything like that, although it could have been.
Bob Foster is also modest about the pilot's contribution to victory.
I think it was more down to organisation. Radar played a great part because it gave us time to get up in the air, gave us warning. This system was way ahead of its time in its way, and it was far better than the Germans had or even imagined we had. We were at the sharp end, but it was the organisation that won the battle.
70 years on, the people who fought in the Battle of Britain are still known as the Few. It's thought of as almost the finest hour of British forces. Do you think that's deserved?
Well, I think so. I mean, I suppose it's a bit funny saying it myself, but everyone was doing the job, and there's a sense of pride, satisfaction, that we won that battle, because the Germans didn't invade, and the whole of the world would have changed had we not won.
Bob Foster went on to become an RAF instructor and to defend Australia. Now 90, he lives by the English coast he once defended, and he's married to a German.
Simon Watts. And if you'd like a daily edition of Witness to download, just go to bbcworldservice.com/podcasts.